Hi, I'm Tim. Welcome to Watchbox Studios and Watches Tonight. I am your host for the evening. We're talking about the three most collectible modern Rolex watches, and we are discussing the most underrated watches of this decade, the 2010s. We're taking live questions, feedback, and comments, and of course, I have your viewer wrist shots, all that tonight on Watches Tonight. Let us not forget that I am technically a pitch man, and the best place to pitch when you're ready to switch, buy, trade, or sell a watch is thewatchbox.com. It's where I buy my watches. You can also see my videos, check out our pre-owned and vintage timepieces, over 2,500 live right now. We are 24 hours a day and global, especially when you want to sell. We pay cash, we pay fast, we make it easy. And because I talk too much, sometimes a picture is worth 1,000 words. Why not combine video and pictures? On Instagram, help me hit 50K in 2K19. I'm probably not going to make it, but 30K is still possible. All video reviews, 60-second format, and you can binge watch my Instagram account. Guys, I talk too much, so your picture's also worth 1,000 words. Viewer wrist shots. Freddie F. of Houston and his Panerai Luminor PAM 523, styling with the watch he won on this channel last week. See, people really do win. Wear it in good health, Freddie. Mr. B of London captures excellent lighting and perspective in this shot of his Tudor Black Bay chronograph steel and gold. Abraham A captures his Omega Speedmaster Moonwatch Coax on a trip to Jerusalem. Wonderful. Is that like early dawn, dusk lighting? Nicely done. It's got a Michael Bay look to it. A viewer chills on a Baja beach with his Omega Planet Ocean Big Blue, a lovely full ceramic GMT from Omega in homage to the Big Blue Chrono 176004 of the 70s. Send your wrist shots to mondaymailbag at thewatchbox.com to see your pieces on these pixels. Okay, jumping into the box real quick, let's see who's joining us. We've got Clay DP from Brisbane, Australia, JBO Surf from Adelaide, Australia. We've got Boss Defender joining from Germany late in the evening, Patrick Seuss, Flippin' Zippo. We've got Kevin S. from New York City. We've got Ernesto Guerrero from Orlando, Florida. We've got Slayer Rock Forever. We've got Yassine H. We've got Pablo Wolf, we've got B&S, Xavier from Manila, we have Blue Shirt Buddha joining in, Provincial Gentry, N&K from London, UK. We've got Snook asking about the 1992 Yachtmaster. Well, that was the first Yachtmaster, and it's a bit of a collectible if you're into originals. We got Eric Nielsen joining in from Western North Carolina, Kevin S., John Doe, Dave Opencar. Good evening, watch fans. Zin here, Zin on the table, and Gordon Crawford from Glasgow. Gordon, I think you're featured in this episode. All right, everyone, joining in, we've got Yorkshire, site of the recent UCI World Championships of Cycling. Jumping into the program, we have a question from one of our own. Samuel asks, what are the most collectible modern Rolex watches? Okay, you're leaving modern open to interpretation. So I'm going to cut off the 80s, the 70s, the 60s, everything before, and say that 90s forward is modern. So let's start with what I believe to be the most collectible non-platinum Daytona of the 90s. If you can find the platinum Zenith, you're going to be able to name your price. For everyone else, there is the Cosmograph Daytona 16519, and in particular, I want to call out the U series and the early A series examples of this watch. It's important to emphasize that the Daytona in white gold with the Zenith movement only launched in 1997, and the Zenith Daytona was done by the end of 1999, which means this watch had a short production run. The watch everyone wanted in that era was the steel model. Then and now, a wait list. The second most desired model was going to be steel gold, meaning the white gold on a strap was the model almost no one wanted. And midway through the A series in 1998, they switched the dial from tritium to luminova. You know, because if we go full screen right here, the U series and the early A series, so 1997 and the first half 1998, will have a tritium signature on the dial. And that's a big deal because this was a rare watch built briefly. And it was a brief run in white gold, period. The tritium dial is brief among brief. All of which is to say, if you're going to own a 90s Daytona and you don't get some sort of weird porcelain dial Cosmograph, floating Cosmograph, or the platinum model, you probably want this. Now, let's jump forward a couple of decades to the 2014 Sea Dweller 4000, the reference 116600. This is a well-known collector's piece. Launched in 2014 and at the time considered to be a hot watch for about 6 months, it was quickly shelved as collectors thought it was basically indistinguishable from the Submariner, but at a substantial price premium. As a result, very few people bought this watch when it was available. It's almost like the manual transmission Ferrari 599. When it was available, nobody wanted it. Now that you can no longer buy it, it's become a hot collector's car. And this is like the Ferrari 599 Fiorano with a 6-speed, all of which is to say now that you can't have, everyone wants. Short production run 2014 to 17 means they are scarce and values are climbing. Unlike Daytonas, which now trade at twice retail price, 5 minutes out of the dealer case, I actually think that value is going to hold through the next recession. I'm also going to mention a watch that came and went in the last 24 months. I'm actually shocked to say one of the watches on this list was made last year, and it was the 1-year only GMT Master 2 116719 BLRO. Of course, the first 40mm supercase ceramic bezel Pepsi was a white gold model that came out in 2014, and that watch had a black dial. Right up until the end of 2017, it still had a black dial. And then in 2018, a new steel Pepsi with a 3-day movement on a Jubilee bracelet arrived, and to distinguish that watch from the white gold, Rolex went to a blue dial, which makes sense. Obviously, it's also on an oyster bracelet, but it wanted to set the watch apart from the white gold black dial that came before. Well, here's the thing. For 2019, that watch that you see right there on the oyster with the blue dial has a new reference number, which is 126719 BLRO. It has a new movement, meaning the old 116719 with the blue dial, as opposed to the black, was made for one model year. And that model year, 2018, was the year everybody was chasing the steel Jubilee. So it's an uncommon timepiece. That 1-year watch is going to be worth serious bank and probably will find itself on the cover of some sort of an auction catalog decades down the line. Guys, let me know, what do you think? Okay, I'm going to answer questions. Obviously, what you think the most collectible modern Rolex watches are, but we've got Omegatron posing a question. Afternoon, Tim. Thoughts on the new Chopard Alpine Eagle? To be fair to Chopard, it has a very nice dial. It's a sort of spiral version of the denim dial on the 2018 Seamaster Railmaster. It looks cool, it's deeply grooved, and it does set itself apart from the Royal Oaks and the Nautilus. That said, this is very much a Me Too watch, and even with a chronometer certification and a manufacturer 60-hour movement, which I like, this is definitely piling onto the bandwagon. It's not one of the strongest full integrated bracelet offerings in recent time. And it's hard to imagine that IWC abandoned its authentically Gerald Genta full bracelet, integrated lug Ingenieur for the current models. Irony, no? But I like the fact that Chopard is attempting to do a swimmable sports watch, but if they really wanted to do a swimmable watch, they should have brought back the Pro 1 of the 2000s with new movements, a higher degree of finish, and an effective marketing campaign to explain the watch. This is just a pile-on watch, even if it is very faithfully based on the design of the mid-1980s St. Moritz. It does look like the St. Moritz. The problem is, that watch in its day was also a Me Too watch. Okay, jumping in, we have Richard Combs joining from South Florida, an old friend of the brand and an old friend, Edward Ledden of Sweden. We've got Dr. T joining in from Wales. We've got Brick Lane. We've got Lawrence G. Hi, Lawrence. Hi, Tim. Andrew, WST12. Hi, Tim. Hi, Andrew. And Thomas Burnett. Hello from Yorkshire. All right, good stuff, guys. You can see Edward Layden saying that the Sea Dweller 4000 is the best modern Rolex. Christopher Peterson saying, I'm a Rolex fanboy and I have been since I was 10, but the last few months I have kind of gotten Rolex fatigue. Right here we've got Abdul R saying the most collectible modern Rolex watch, 41mm day-date with unique dials and day-date 3690s with weird material. Okay guys, Lawrence G asking, Tim, your thoughts on the 39mm Rolex Explorer? You have options. Right now there is a logjam of 39 to 40mm stainless steel Rolex Oyster bracelet sports watches with 3 hands and no date. Really, you've got the Oyster Perpetual 39, you've got the Explorer 39, you've got the Air King, and you've got the Milgauss. So you're gonna find something you like. If you're shopping one, you may as well shop them all. And On that topic, by the way, Peter J. joining from Germany. Thank you so much for staying up late with us in continental Europe. If you are suffering from Rolex burnout, the next segment is going to be the cure for the common chronometer. The most underrated watches of the last decade. Now, I've done the most influential watches of the last decade. I've done the most significant designs of the last decade. And as we draw to a close, and the 2010s are more behind us than ahead, with 3 months to go, 3 whole months remaining, let's count off the most underrated watches since 2010. Now, I have to warn you, this is an interactive feature, so I want to know your nominations for the most underrated watches of the decade. You don't have to be year specific, but I will be. And again, warning, this is not going to be another YouTube video wank about steel 5711s, overpriced vintage basket cases, and everything steel Rolex. For that matter, this is not going to be another celebration of the Rolex Hulk. If you want that, you can find it elsewhere on the tube. I'm talking about the true underrated gems. And I'll admit this is a balancing act, as the list was compiled with an interest finding a harmony between underrated watches and reasonable public awareness. So I understand for the really hardcore, the hardest of the hardcore, we could have done an entire segment about watches no one's discussing from acknowledged masters who make like 6 watches a year, like Aaron Bacek, Karsten Frostdorf, and Beat Haldeman. And I've got, that's the Frostdorf shock-resistant spirograph tourbillon, and then Beat Haldeman. Did you know there was a resonance watch that includes not 1, but 2 tourbillon regulators mobile on the dial? There is, and he offers a lifetime warranty on his watches. But again, if you're into a Haldeman, this is probably not the segment for you. That's just a little too niche. By the way, that's like an exit watch. That's the last watch you ever buy. Okay, following, we're going to talk about the 2010s here, which followed what Andy Serwer, formerly of Fortune magazine, brilliantly dubbed the decade from hell, the 2000s. And our first bat out of hell watch for the 2010s is the 2010 Ulysse Nardin El Toro Perpetual Calendar GMT Plus Minus. This is an incredible watch, and yes, I will admit that 500 is way too much for a large, complicated platinum watch. It is in no way exclusive, and given the original retail price of $65,000, it's no wonder that this was a slow seller. That said, sometimes you can't have too much of a good thing, and this watch features refinements and functions that runneth over. We're talking refinements in this 43mm platinum case that include a 24-hour second time zone with plus or minus 1-hour adjustment triggers. We are talking about a bidirectional perpetual calendar with a grand date, the month, the day, and even the year and the decade. And by the way, bidirectional. You don't have to send it back to the factory in the year 2100, and if you set it too far ahead, just turn it back. This has a ceramic bezel to block the blows against that plentiful platinum case, and a COSC chronometer certification. It's also 100 meters water resistant, has tons of lume, and thus is a viable sports watch. There's an optional rubber strap and a UN base caliber that is a manufacturer movement and visible through the case back. These make more sense used, as you can buy them for roughly $30,000 less than the $65,000 retail back in 2010. So for $30,000 to $35,000, that's a hell of a complication if you're just looking for watchmaking and value. Jumping into the box right here, Barry BKT says, I think the Vacheron VCs, the Overseas, has been underrated. And since 2016, you could certainly make the case that compared to any Aquanaut, Nautilus, or Royal Oak, the Overseas definitely is underrated. We've got Yeti joining in from Sweden, and then we've got Amar A joining from Riyadh. Thank you for staying up very late with me, Amar. I really appreciate that. And then we've got Fabrice joining from Europe, saying the most underrated gem of the 2010s, Omega Railmaster 1957 anniversary, part of the 1957 trilogy, along with the Seamaster 300 and the Speedmaster. That's a great choice, and if you can get one of the trilogy models with identical serial numbers, even better. Jumping into the box right here, we've got Mark S saying that UN are underrated watchmakers, and Steve Bowen saying a bidirectional perpetual calendar. Holy crap, that is true. Bidirectional perpetual calendars, from what I understand, you can get them from Moser, Grubel Forsey, Ulysse Nardin, and I think MB and F. Those are our bidirectional perpetual calendars. Jumping into my next nomination for 2011. 2011 overall was a tough year for me, but I have to say it was a great year for fans of value stainless steel chronographs. I was in the military, so hard knocks right there, but Roger Dubuis was rocking it at SIHH with the Monegasque Chronograph, a watch that was a design tour de force inspired by Monte Carlo roulette tables on the dial, and about the case and the bezel, the late, great, and much lamented and much missed Roger Dubuis sympathy of the 1990s. And there's one of the original crystal-shaped bezel watches on my wrist, so you can see where the design comes from. This Roger Dubuis was offered in stainless steel with micro-rotor automatic caliber RD680. RD680 was a micro-rotor automatic with a visible vertical clutch. You can see the pincers adjacent to the balance wheel and the clutch discs adjacent to the pincers. It had a column wheel. It was both Geneva hallmark and a certified Swiss chronometer. How often do you find a double certification COSC, Geneva hallmark, vertical clutch, column wheel, micro-rotor chronograph caliber? Not often. This is pretty much the game, and that maybe Chopard. This is a watch that brings it all. The clincher was a now legendary Chesterfield-bound leather strap that's probably better remembered than the watch itself and has become something of a hot traded collector's item. That's the rose gold version of the Monegasque Chrono. The stainless steel versions of this Roger Dubuis Monegasque Chronograph now trade for around $12,000, all boxes and papers, in great condition, unpolished. And the watch originally retailed in 2011 for almost $30, so you're getting a hell of a bargain. People ask me, what is the best value if you want Geneva hallmark? That may be a Chopard LUC Quattro. If you can wear a 44mm case and it wears nice and thin, you've got no excuse not to. All right, let's read from the chat right here. Kevin S. saying that UN is crazy looking. And then right here we have 24K. This is Felix from Arabia. He's saying Glasuta Original, Parmigiani, Gerard Perregaux, Vacheron Constantin, Panerai, anything not AP, Rolex, or Patek is underrated. And I'm happy to say I have most of those brands in this feature. And then right here, we have Omegatron saying he is a fan of Laurent Ferrier micro rotors, he and JBO both, and well, me too, so that makes 3. And then right here, we have a request to go full screen from Monkey C Productions. So guys, in the control cab, if you could go full screen on some of these watches, that would be much appreciated. And then we've got Lucky Gold Panda opining, are the new Seiko Prospects and Presage chronographs on your radar? They are. I'm looking forward to seeing in particular the SPB 111 with the forest green dial. I'm really excited about that limited edition piece. And then Eric Nielsen saying the Seamaster 300 Trilogy is 2mm smaller than the regular Seamaster 300 and has a countdown bezel if that's your thing. And Valence joining. I believe Valence was one of our viewers from Malaysia, if I remember correctly, and a recent feature in our wrist shots. Blue Shirt Buddha opining that the JLC Polaris is severely underrated. You know what? I would say the pendulum is probably swinging back in its directions. It was so coldly received that it's almost become an underrated watch. Now jumping forward, 2012. The third year of the decade, technically speaking, the Zenith Pilot DoubleMatic has got to be the watch for that year. Years ago, when I shot my first video of the DoubleMatic, I declared it the ultimate value in complications, and if we can hold that shot of that video, I stand by that claim. Most of the press in 2012 focused on the Type 20 Montre d'Aéronef Zenith Pilot watches, especially the limited edition Type 20 5011K, but there were only 325 of those in titanium and rose. This was the buy. 45mm, the DoubleMatic was the watch to have, and it's easier to wear than that size implies. As you can see, I'm pulling it off there on a 16cm circumference wrist. It is packed to the gild with features, and that means Zenith automatic El Primero caliber 4046 with a chronograph, a large date, a quick set for that large date. It features an alarm, an on-off function for the alarm, an animated color-changing power reserve indicator for the alarm, and world time. That's a hell of a lot of functionality for a watch you can now pick up for 10 grand. Remember, 10 grand doesn't buy you a whole lot of steel Rolex sports watch these days, but you can get more complication than literally any Patek Philippe short of a Grandmaster chime. So The Type 20 DoubleMatic remains a grail watch for me, but it's going to have to be a couple of decades and a couple of dozen pounds before I can fit it on my wrist full time. I can date this one, but not marry. And if the bike has anything to say, I'm probably never going to fit that watch. All right, jumping into the box right here. We got WC joking, it can even bake cookies. And then we have, well, am I pronouncing this right? Relaxed 13 saying the asymmetry on that Zenith would drive me nuts, but maybe it's calculated asymmetry. After all, in the jazz age, dissonance is cool. And we are entering the roaring 20s at the end of the 2010s, so jazz is back. All right, here. We got HJ saying the Universal Genève Compacts. Vintage, highly underrated. And then we've got Arabia. Felix saying underrated, picked up an Oyster Quartz old stock for $3K. If you can find an Oyster Quartz Datejust for $3K, you made off like a bandit. That is a present collectible, possibly an investment from the future. And we got Silver 2 joining in from Malaysia. We've got Vlad the Impaler saying Hamilton and Longines are underrated severely. And then Top 83 saying JLC Master Moon. I love the Master Moon in black. Good choice. Jumping into 2013, and a watch that is neither Swiss nor German. Around the world, the beast from the east, the 2013 Grand Seiko SBGW047, celebrating 100 years of Seiko watchmaking. This is a tribute to the 1967 Grand Seiko 44GS, which was a design landmark in its own right and the first Danai Sakosha or later Seiko Instruments watch product. So for 2013, it was reborn in achingly gorgeous and scrupulously accurate form at 37.9 millimeters versus 35.8 of the original. Few concessions were made to modernity, and though there were 3 gold versions, white, yellow, and rose of this watch, only the steel model you see here featured a recreation of the original dial. Perhaps the cult classic 44GS polyhedron case is what gets me here, because it was recreated in razor-sharp angles and facets with Zaratsu polishing, all done by Grand Seiko's tin wheel method. This is a hand-finished watch. And how much do you love that box sapphire designed to emulate plexiglass? Maybe it was the manual wind 9S64 3-day movement or the early phase of Grand Seiko's international rollout, but the watch didn't seem to garner the love or attention it deserved. Most people looking for vintage reissues want some sort of 60s or 50s Swiss diver or pilot watch. This is better. Or at the very least, this is more exclusive, loving, rare, and original. And it's hard to find a pre-owned watch that's entirely hand-finished outside in. This is a watch that has been Zaratsu polished, finished like the movement components of most high-end Swiss watches, and it's a component the size of a case, not a swan's neck regulator, so you're getting a lot of value here. 70 pieces in each of yellow, white, and rose gold, but 700 pieces in steel is the connoisseur's choice. Viewer wrist shots. Enough talking. Pictures. Your watches. Abdul R. from Germany, a native of the Black Forest and his Tudor heritage Black Bay, joining us from the German-French border in Strasbourg, France. We've got Russell K., double pumped with carbon fiber, vitreous enamel, and precious metal with his limited edition 2019 Datograph Lumen and his Patek Philippe 5370-piece split seconds chronograph. Chaz M. is getting ready to dive. It is Halloween, and we've got the Great Pumpkin. We got a Seiko SRPC posing under the marquee, and Adam S. enjoys endless Mediterranean summer on a Tel Aviv beach with his Omega Seamaster Aquaterra and a lovely and luminescent blue teak deck concept dial. Guys, send your wrist shots to mondaymailbag at thewatchbox.com to see your analog on my digital. Let's jump into the box right here. Guys, what do you think? We have one comment saying all Breguet watches are underrated. We have some comments along the lines of Steve Bowden saying Tim, somehow picks can never do justice to a Grand Seiko dial, and that's absolutely true. And I see Omegatron here might be opining, I missed the prior comment, saying that the Cartier Santos has important horological value and pedigree, and it might be an underrated watch in its own right. I would say, yeah. I think the Cartier Santos launched last year is probably one of the most underrated steel sports watches you can buy for under $7,000. Then we have Vlad the Impaler opining that his Maurice Lacroix Globe Reveille even wakes up the chicken cutlets. That's an underrated brand right there, Maurice Lacroix. And then right here, we've got Jason360 saying vintage King Seiko way underappreciated. That's a good point. And then we've got Brick Lane saying, the most underrated diver of all time is the Blancpain 50 Fathoms. Well, you could say that for a watch that did beat Rolex to the punch in inventing the modern dive watch format, given the amount of mindshare owned by the Rolex Submariner versus the Blancpain that came first, I would argue that, yeah, it is pretty underrated. It's almost like a VHS Betamax kind of thing going on right there. And then right here we have Kevin S. saying, how about the Grand Seiko SBGW 231, similar three-hand classic and similar size. That was a wonderful manual wind dress style watch from about 2 model years back that was lovely, underrated, and probably undersold, because Grand Seiko, as much as I love the brand, most of its penetration does seem to be in all-arounders that have about 100 meters of water resistance, and the sports watches. The pure dress pieces don't get enough play, but dress watches, that's a tough egg to crack these days, and I would say that particular nut has even foiled Rolex, as Cellini year after year goes relatively nowhere. So that's not just a knock on Grand Seiko. And then right here we got Vlad the Impaler saying Spring Drive is underrated. Dante Miami saying all Glasuta Original, including the Panamatic Lunar and Pano Inverse, and so many Blancpain models, including the Le Mans Flyback and the dual time zone models. They are all underrated. I would agree with that. And then we've got Horween saying Glasuit Big Date Diver, very underrated. I'm actually going to get some of the CQ models in very soon, so watch the Wednesday Watches and Weekend Watches programs because they're coming within the next week. All right, 2014. I'm going to go with an underrated brand and model here, but the Ball Engineer 2 Magneto S. This was a flat-out awesome stainless steel 42mm sports watch, so it's a great size. It cost $3,400. It is an all-in committed tool watch featuring a retractable Stargate-style mu-metal iris that you could open or close, open to see the movement, close to achieve a Milgauss-worthy 80,000 ampere per meter anti-magnetism. And if we can go back to the Ball Engineer 2 Magneto S dial side, you can see the coined bezel that you turn to open or close that iris shield. It is very cool. The watch features tritium tracers on its dial that allow you to basically throw the thing in a closet for a year, pull it out at night, and it's still glowing, which is awesome. The dial has excellent depth with a sort of key lime, Kelly green, and black medley that just flat out works. It's 100 meters water resistant. It's a COSC certified chronometer. Like I said, 42 in steel, the size is perfect. And for about $1,600 gray market or pre-owned, these are just a screaming buy. They're well made. They feel tank-like in the hand. I would call this a Zin alternative. And I don't shout out many alternatives to one of my favorite houses. An underrated watch, and one that unfortunately, because of the brand and the model, sort of got lost to history. Right here, we've got Steve, a ball fan. We've got Hugh saying, always nice to have balls on the show. And then we've got Dante Miami saying that the Grand Date Flyback caliber 1185 Blancpain is an excellent piece. We've got Felix over in Arabia saying Palladium Parmigiani Chrono. It's true, you can get a Parmigiani Pershing sports chronograph for a hell of a lot less than a Rolex BLNR. That's a great value in precious metal chronos from a cool independent brand. And then we've got Hayden saying the Blancpain Villeray Annual Calendar GMT is super underrated in my opinion. Then again, I don't know much about the quality of the watch or the movement. Don't worry. All I can tell you is they're both beautifully and handsomely made with integrity in Le Brassus. And then we've got Rich Buddy saying a Grand Seiko dress watches cost more than a Patek. It is true. If you get one of the extended power reserve models made by the Micro Artist Studio, then yeah. And if you get something from the Crador line, then yeah. But then again, if you're getting a Crador watch, you will be happy. They are more beautifully finished than all but the highest of high complications from Patek Philippe. I would even compare the finishing, especially on the tips of the bridges and the inner angles. I would compare them to Long und Heine, Kari Voutilainen, Philippe Dufour, and Aaron Beche, who we discussed earlier in the show, if in passing. Right here, we have Vlad the Impaler saying all of the Oris 10-day power reserve watches are extremely underrated. That is true. All of the caliber 110 models are hugely underrated. You can basically get an IWC Big Pilot or Portuguese automatic for half the price with a longer power reserve from Oris. Jumping right here, we see George V. We'll say this again, all Longa are underrated by a mile, and Brick Lane, Piaget, Altiplano rather underrated. You don't say. Was that foreshadowing? All right, jumping back into the box. 2015, the IWC Portofino Mono Pusher Chronograph. For those keeping score, this is reference 5151. Quick, name the best 8-day power reserve mono pusher manufacturer caliber dress chronograph of 2015. It's this and literally nothing else. There's only one game in town, and it remains one of the rarest modern IWCs. A rarely sold model from a rarely sold model line, the IWC Portofino. First shown to the public in 2013, the watch didn't actually arrive until 2015 because of difficulty executing this rather complex movement. It was dead as a model by the end of 2017, which means we have about 2.5 model years worth of sales of a very slow mover. If you want the rarest mainstream modern IWC that's not like the Sidereal Scafusia or a constant force movement, this is it. The caliber 59-360 packed 192 hours of endurance, a column wheel mono pusher chronograph, an overcoil hairspring free sprung with 5-position adjustment, stop seconds, a quick set date. It's got everything you could possibly want with a power reserve indicator on the dial, and that column wheel is the size of most sports watch crowns. It's huge, and the movement is properly sized for the case because it's developed from the 50,000 series automatics. The watch is 45 millimeters in diameter, but it's 13 millimeters thick, broad, and flat, which means it's wearable even on a small wrist. I like this one enough to buy it. These are rarely seen, but they impress with presence, grace, refinement, and again, a hell of a lot of features for what you're paying to get one of these in steel. These are awesome watches. 2016, jumping into FP Journe. What could be underrated from a brand that seems endlessly hyped, especially on the Wednesday show on this channel? Well, how about the Elegant 48? The preceding FP Journe Elegant ladies watch received considerable attention as it was FP Journe's first dedicated ladies model and first quartz offering. In contrast, the 2016 Elegant 48 for men almost felt like a soft launch product. Photos began to appear early in 2016, but there was very little information in the press, and Journe didn't do a good job of communicating this watch. Combine male collector disdain for quartz movements, the compromised slow product launch, and the indignity of a men's watch derived from a women's product, and you have the most underrated watch of 2016. And that's a shame, because the titanium Elegant 48 is an awesome product. You're getting a Journe watch for around 12 grand. It is easily the most swimmable, and I would even go so far as to say only swimmable FP Journe, as it features a screw-down crown in its titanium case, and I have it from the factory that real-world water resistance of this watch, though 30 meters rated, is beyond 50 meters, and they endorse it for aquatic use. Not diving, but the pool. It has epic lume, as the entire dial is a solid chunk of luminova. This thing could be used as a flashlight, and it's worth mentioning that that little cutaway in the dial is an eccentric weight that wakes up the movement. So the movement of your wrist wakes up the movement to reset the hands, which go into a latent phase until you put it back on the wrist. As a result, it has a shelf life when it's powered down in standby mode of 18 years. And once again, 12 grand for a new FP Journe with a warranty. That's a tough proposition to resist. And you're not laying out $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 to get into the club. It's just a cool, underrated, and very interesting display caseback, as this is one of the only quartz watches with a display caseback you would want to see. It's up there with the 40th anniversary Laureato quartz from 2010 and like Seiko and Crador products with hand-finished movements. And that is exalted company. 18 karat rose gold on your quartz movement. I love. And if you note, can we go full screen? There's even a little heart right there in the wiring of the circuitry. So it loves you back. Jumping into the chat box right here, we have Edward Ledden saying some Richard Mille watches are underrated like the RMO2. This is true. Some of the more complicated, early and obscure RM watches are underrated. But don't you dare tell me that any RM11 is underrated. That won't pass the lab test. I'm sorry. And then right here, we have Argo comparing the FP to a Timex Indiglo. The difference is the FP does not use up your battery. That is not powered lume. That's all natural, and it stays that way all night. PY asking, how much is that FP pre-owned? Actually, they hold their value really well, right around 12 grand. And then right here, we have JPG saying my Tissot also wakes after not using it. It's 10 times less. Yeah, but your Tissot doesn't remember what the time is. And right here we have Kevin S. saying the Tudor North flag is hugely underrated, and I totally agree with that. We've got Felix in Arabia saying the North flag on the leather strap, well, he's saying he doesn't like it on the strap because he says the lock keeps breaking. All right, not quite sure what that means, but we'll take it under advisory. And then we have Eric Nielsen saying our friend Mr. Thanos, news to follow, demonstrated the Journe wake-up call on a live feed. Super cool. All right. Then we have Kevin S. saying that the North flag on a bracelet is underrated and wears well. Gordon Crawford saying Zenith Day-Fi 21 ceramic chronograph, underrated. Okay, I'll say the Day-Fi 21s are a little bit underrated. Now, 2017, we're into the modern era. We're into the era when I started attending SIHH. The Parmigiani Tanda 1950 micro rotor in steel. The watch existed previously, but in steel for 10 grand, all of a sudden you've got a scalding proposition. A perfectly sized 8.2 millimeter thick 40 millimeter steel micro rotor from a cool independent brand, vertically integrated with a micro rotor auto that you will find in exalted brands. You will find that micro rotor in seriously high horology, and you're getting it here from the manufacturer itself for 10 grand. Sound good? It was. There was a very cool black dial model that was also 10K, and pre-owned prices at a fraction of that, think 6 to 7. These are premier pre-owned buys. Now, you guys mentioned Piaget, and I'm happy to deliver. As for 2018, the most underrated watch was indisputably a Piaget, because any Piaget is underrated. It's a great house, it's a great manufacturer, and we never talk about it. Again, it's not your 5711 in steel, and thank God for that. That watch is 4.3 millimeters thick, which I measured is 4 1/2 standard plastic credit cards. This is the record-breaking watch that everyone forgot because Rolex Daytona. Daytona. And the peripheral rotor of caliber 910 on this Altiplano Ultimate 910 was 22 karat gold, blackened. It ran around the outside of the dial because the dial is the movement. This is a 41 millimeter dress watch that was the world's thinnest automatic at the time at 4.3, and the movement is constructed with the case back as the structural base plate of the movement. I'll say that again. The wheels, the pinions, the levers, the springs, they all go into the case back. The watch has no conventional separation of movement and case. It even has a reasonable 50-hour power reserve, and this blade-like watch, and it truly is blade-like, includes a hanging barrel that pivots only on one side. It has no upper bridge, an exposed train, and a dial that is actually recessed below the bridges to enable it to achieve that sub 4.5 millimeter credit card measurement. $28,400, it's a lot of money. For a fraction of that pre-owned, it's a hell of a buy. So for 2019, let me jump into the box real quick. We got Josh H. joining from Melbourne, Australia. We got Kevin S. asking about the Grand Seiko Godzilla. You gotta be a big fan of Godzilla to go for the Grand Seiko Godzilla. My favorite Grand Seiko Godzilla was the SBGC 229 Nissan GTR limited edition. The Godzilla itself is both too large and too wacky for me, but I think it's a lot of fun, and hey, it is true to history, both Grand Seikos and Toho film. So if you're into cinema, you'd remember that the original Godzilla movie was very serious social commentary. It wasn't supposed to be comic relief, even if the suitimation today looks a bit quaint, but the original Godzilla was very serious cinema, and if any movie deserves a watch from Grand Seiko, it would be that one. That and maybe Rashomon, but I don't know how you do that. Not with a watch. And then right here, we've got Edward Ledden saying, underrated watches. Nobody talks about a certain Alain Silberstein. That is right. Architect et horloger. First an architect and later a watchmaker in mid-1985, he made independent watchmaking a thing. Back when independent watchmaking was at best bespoke Franck Muller or F.P. Journe. And it's important to note that he was doing independent horology before it was even cool. Not like 5 or 6 years, but decades before it was cool. Do you want an enamel-dialed tourbillon? He made those. Do you want cool jump hours? Do you want wacky watches? Do you want the brand that introduced postmodernism to the luxury watch space? The Andy Warhol, the Fluxus, the Roy Lichtenstein of watches. That's Alain Silberstein, and he does deserve an affectionate nod from this quarter and probably from yours as well. Great value and someday historically important pieces. All right, what should be... Great joke from Kevin S. I hear that Buck Dharma is on the wait list for the Godzilla. They should just send him one. BOC joke. All right, guys. What is the most underrated watch? And I agree with you, Jason F. The Patek Philippe 5524 is underrated. But what is the most underrated watch of 2019? I don't know yet. You need a little bit of perspective and hindsight to make a judgment like that. And Deng Xiaoping famously said when asked about his thoughts reflecting on the revolution in France, and this was in the 80s, he said it's probably too soon to tell. He was a thoughtful man. I'm not quite that thoughtful. So let's take a guess. I think the most underrated watch of 2019 will be the Tudor P01 because they went out on a limb and created a polarizing watch. This could have been just another Black Bay. Instead, they took a connoisseur's historic piece, a rare historic piece, a watch nerd's historic piece, and they stayed very true to it. Even the lugs and the locking system for the bezel are true to history, very intricate and technically impressive. So while a lot of folks piled on, and I have to admit the fit of this watch is almost impossible on a small wrist, I do think we will look back on this watch as a brave effort and an underrated Tudor watch, and possibly the most underrated watch of 2019. Vegas Milgauss, with even a more charitable judgment, opining Audemars Piguet code 1159. Let's jump back into your wrist shots with Raphael C. boldly wearing his Vacheron Constantin, the off-brand, to the Patek Philippe Singapore Grand Exhibition. So he's wearing a brand Y watch at a brand X exhibition or vice versa. We've got Gordon C. of Glasgow, Scotland, who I saw in the chat box tonight. This is the Isle of Skye with his Rolex Explorer. We have Damien W. of Zurich, flying high with his Tudor Pelagos left-hand drive. Who needs a pilot's watch? And we've got Andreas W. of Sweden answering my call for photographic proof of the solid dial Zenith Dayfi 21. Maybe that was the most underrated watch of 2017. I have yet to see one in the metal. Great choice, Andreas, and thank you. Send your wrist shots to mondaymailbag@thewatchbox.com to see your watches on this box. Remember, comment and subscribe. Join me over on Watchbox Reviews, my other YouTube channel, if you want to see literally unlimited thousands of videos of watch reviews. And finally, join me on Instagram. Help me fill the gap on Tim_Mosso. 60-second video reviews, over 600 posted. I'm going to strive for 30K in 2K19. Guys, thank you so much. Comment below. Thanks to you. Thanks to my crew. Time out, Tim out. And thanks for logging on.